All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. Motion carries. Moving on to reports, Mr. Black.
Sure, I'll start off. Board members, before we get into the two items that I'd like to talk about, just want to say thank you again for John and Chris and our board challengers that participated last night when I was prepping for tonight. I just clicked on the site. It's on our YouTube channel. And I think there was 191 views. So our community are taking that in. Today we posted a message that'll be going out on Facebook as well, which then through the NL Connect app. So that forum will be out for our school community to take in. So thanks again. Last week was National School Breakfast Week in the United States and throughout our country. And I think we all know the importance of what a great breakfast does to prepare our students and our adults and all staff as well to prepare for the day. The one item I just wanted to point out, 12 million breakfasts are served daily within our public school system throughout to support education within. Not all students participate in it, but it is an option for families that feel that is relevant to them. And we appreciate all of our staff, both our team through Chartwells and as well our district staff that are involved in supporting that operation on a daily basis. Thank you. Lastly, just to recognize our extra effort degree of help for our district, recognizing Katie Blau. Many of you were at our post-secondary fair last week, and as well, some participated in our exit interviews with our senior class. Mrs. Blau, again, did an outstanding job supporting that with the organization piece under the direction of Brian and our guidance counselors to support that process. It's just great to see the students prepare, and the activity just ran flawlessly again. And Katie has done an outstanding job and continues to do that to support those operations. So thank you, Katie, for your effort. Because I know our community, that's a touch point of our community where they're coming in and working with our students and our school. And it just ran very, very well. So thank you. Any questions for me on the administrative report? Okay.
Hearing none, we'll move to the business services report by Mr. Marquardt.
Okay, good evening, board members. Just one item on the director report tonight. It was a total compensation meeting that we just held in the back room. We had a lot of topics on there and pushed through our hour and 45 minutes, and we still have a lot to discuss. We will continue to meet as a committee and bring forward those potential recommendations to the board, likely within the timing of what we've had in prior years with some discussion in April, and continue to evaluate how the wage increases fit into our budget update. Any other comments from the committee? All right, that's all I had tonight.
Next, we will hear from the Director of Pupil Services, Mrs. Martin.
Hello, I have a number of things on my board report tonight. First thing I wanted to talk about was we once again, for the second year in a row, were granted the Getting Kids Ahead Mental Health Initiative. That award is approximately $40,000. And if you look down through the writing there, it explains some of the things that we can budget for in the school district to support that. That is in addition to the mental health grant, which I wrote for the last couple of years. That was in approximately $60,000, and I will be submitting an application again on that. I'm working on that right now, and we could potentially receive another $70,000 for the next round of mental health grants, and that will be awarded 2 years in a row if we receive that grant. So I just wanted to update the board on that. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the process of Close Gap. For those of you who have kiddos in the school, you've probably heard them talking about this. Close Gap is a technology asset that we are using with the counseling staff, and we are rolling it out at various grade levels, trying to kind of sample which grades, seeing where it fits best. And what it is for students who are seeing their counselor in the hallway that might be too shy or intimidated to talk and have a face-to-face conversation that they would like to come in or make an appointment. It just kind of takes that barrier away that they're able to send a message to their counselor that they would like to be seen. So we have been experimenting with that. Related, and in addition, the next one on there, the safety bot alerts, that continues to function, and Erin Marsh, our school social worker, is getting most of those alerts, and then she passes the concerns on to the building level administrators. And we've talked about that before. That goes around the clock, 24/7, when students are typing something in a Google Doc or Google Classroom, or if they're sending something on email. She will receive those concerning messages, and then whether it's the middle of the night, as all of our principals know, or any time of the day, we call in when we need police response to a concerning incident. So just kind of reminding the board some of the safety things that continue on. Related, my next item on here is the outside board counseling resources. So our counselors have once again been distributing these out to the families and staff. We have this in brochure form. It's on our website. It's in a handout form. We have a memorandum of understanding with all of the counseling resources on here, and you have the list in front of you, and we update those memorandums of understanding every year. And you guys are probably seeing visibly most Rawhide Youth Services, who are physically pushed into our campus, as well as Sherman Counseling, to provide our students those resources. And what we're doing is we're taking away the barriers from families so that they don't need to take off of work to drive their kiddo to an appointment. Those appointments are available right on site. The difference between what Rawhide is doing and what Sherman is doing, Sherman can also provide a neuropsychological evaluation for those families that are seeking that resource. So again, just kudos to all of those providers. Down lower in that article, I wanted to bring your attention to something that we have rolling this year. I'm surprised how few people know this, so I wanted to put it in writing in my board report. All of the 111 numbers are assigned to an urgent response. So 211, I know Joe Marquardt is very familiar with, that is the United Way resources. So you call 211 any time of day, somebody answers the phone and is able to connect the families with community resources they might need if they would have an urgency. And that can be counseling resources, that can be resources they might need if they have a fire. 311 is assigned, 411, most of you guys know back from even when you were little directory assistants. All the 11 numbers are convenient so that people do not need to memorize or remember what's that for. How often in your life have you used Digger's Hotline? I've only used it once, but when you need it, and you need to know that number right away. So obviously, we're all very familiar with 911. The additional resource I'm putting on here this year, and you guys have probably seen some of the public service commercials going out. 988 is now the suicide prevention hotline. And why I put all these other ones on here is because we probably get asked, why isn't it 911 or 811 or 711? Because all the 11 numbers are assigned. So 988 was the number assigned. And for those of you who are not familiar, we have been putting the suicide prevention line number on all of our students' ID cards for years, at least as long as I've been here. This year, it's an easier number. So I went back to my 7th grader. I'm like, do you have your ID card from the last couple of years? I just wanted to make sure they were on here. And the students keep these ID cards, most of them in their Chromebook case, because there's a little picture thing where when they have to access their card, it's right there. I spot checked it in the high school during an IE time, and I talked to some of the kids. They all pulled out their cards, were aware of the number. They said their administration team had talked to them about it at the beginning of the year, and they said the teachers were reinforcing it in the classrooms as well. So I urge you, as you're watching commercials, if you see that public service announcement running, to be aware, because they have really rolled that out to the community. Unrelated to that, I didn't specifically write about it in here. The principals got an email today from school Suresh in our school nursing program. They are all working with her right now to recalibrate and recertify the district in Heart Saver training. So those of you who remember who've been on the board for a while, we rolled that out about 4 years ago, and we need to recalibrate it every couple of years. So this is an addition to our Department of Justice process. Not all districts are a Heart Saver district. What added layer it adds is when we are doing the crisis team training, we are also adding that piece in. So the AED, everybody should know when they're in their building, in their classrooms, where's the closest AED. And people that are Heart Saver trained on the crisis team are also certified to know how to use that. So I know a question came up last week at the board meeting when we were talking about like a safety survey to staff, and we were talking about, oh, how can we ask them how they feel safe? These are some of the things that we wanted to know. They're going to be factual questions, not feeling questions. So the board said you're going to be walking around the building. Some of the things I want you to watch for is when you're walking in the room, I want you to see that every single classroom has one of these. If they don't, let me know, because this should be right by their room. As you're walking around the buildings, I want you to know that in the top right corner of every staff member's desk drawer is this crisis manual, and it's also in their subfolder. And if you're walking around and you don't see that the staff member is able to show you where it is, let me know. So these are some of the things that we keep training them on. The other thing visibly I wanted the board to look for as you're walking around, every room, whether it's a classroom or not, should have a safety bag hanging right where they exit the room. So as we're doing the tornado drills or the fire drills or the crisis drills, the staff members are trained to know, grab this and go with this and take this with you. And what is inside the safety bags are the stop and bleed kits, the tourniquets, they have flashlights in here, all the resources they would need in a moment of crisis. And so again, what are we asking the staff? Do you know where your safety bag is? Do you know where your crisis plan is? The other thing, what this is, blown up, I want to show you on the staff members' cards and the student cards. If I would inadvertently be in the gym and all of a sudden Brian calls a crisis drill and I'm like, ooh, which one is that? It's right on the back of the cards. And show them, are you guys wearing these at all times? Even staff members like Jill, who doesn't get in the buildings very often. Jill, do you have your ID on? If she would inadvertently be somewhere and a drill is called, she's able to look at that. The students have the same thing on their ID cards. So again, feeling safe, knowing how to respond. It's our intention and our hope with the crisis team and the safety team that these things become so mundane, so routine, that it is music to my ear that as we're going around doing these drills, staff and students are complaining like, oh, didn't we already do this? I know how to do that. That's music to my ears, because if there is a moment where they get anxious or agitated, we want it to become so muscle memory, so second nature that they know how to do that. The other thing I want the board to watch for is as you're going around, if you see a drill going on in the building, the members of the crisis teams, when they evacuate, not only do they have their safety bag with them, they put on their safety vests. And as the police department would roll up or the fire department would roll up, the people wearing these vests, the fire department doesn't know who Brian Yerke is, but if they see somebody with this vest, they know that's somebody who knows what they are doing. I can ask that person for assistance in that moment. Okay, and in each building, depending on the building size, there are probably at least 5 to 20 staff members trained as a crisis training member. The other thing I wanted to kind of point out and show you related to that, we have resources additionally for the families. We pass these out at the beginning of the year and we have stacks of them in all the offices. These are students' DNA kits. So if families want to pick these up and they're stacked on all the secretary's desks, they are able to open these up and get a DNA sample from their children, as well as take their fingerprints. So if the worst would happen, the family members have these at the ready, and it has the student's picture in, their fingerprints, and a DNA sample. And we provide those to the family every year. So again, just bringing that up as we're talking to the board about safety and crisis and the staff survey on if they feel safe. These are things that I want you to know. So I was in a building I'm not in a lot last week, and Joe Marquardt was up there, and he was taking a vendor for the Sugar Bush building project through the building. The first thing I saw Joe do was take that person in the office, make them sign in and get an ID badge. Then Joe walked them around the building, and I know he was just showing them where the areas are, but what the staff was noticing is that person has an ID badge on, they're walking with Joe. That's an unknown adult. I don't know them, but they have signed in, they have a badge on, and Joe is kind of introducing them to the kids and the staff so that they felt safe. So at one point, Joe had to leave the building and leave the vendor there, but that unknown adult was still identified and the people still felt safe. So one of the things we asked on the staff safety survey, have you ever seen an adult in the building that shouldn't be there? Okay, and the badge is one way to alert us that that's a safe adult. And I know that's going to be happening a lot at Sugar Bush coming up because we're going to have a lot of vendors in the building. Last thing I have on my board report is to tell the board about an additional resource that we continue to utilize. Most of the board is familiar. We have a homeless shelter in town. It is called the Mission of Hope House. And this is the time of year where our families are kind of struggling with resources. This is the time of year where if they had their, they're starting to worry about things like we're getting to April 15th and the heat might be turned off, the water might be turned off. Where can I get some additional resources? Besides providing in-housing at the shelter, they provide other additional resources. So a family can just walk in and ask for a festival foods voucher or a quick trip voucher. They can ask for hygiene needs, they can ask for clothing needs. The Mission of Hope House also owns the Bridge thrift store in town, so families can get vouchers to shop there. So I just wanted to make that connection, and also to let you know that I continue to be a board member on the Mission of Hope House board. as well as Erin Marsh, our school social worker. So we are bridging that gap for that, our families that are utilizing that shelter between the school district and what the families can resource. Do you have any questions on anything in my board report?
Questions? Hearing none, we'll move to the next agenda item, which is the Director of Teaching and Learning Report, Mrs. Seaver.
Good evening, board members. Trying to just keep you in the loop on everything that's going on. Couple things in the packet does include the fact that we had the instructional committee meeting. So just the agenda items that were covered in there included review of our recent request for review of the library materials, and we suggested at that meeting to push it to policy to just have some time to look at those and see whether or not curriculum should maybe be separated from the library, just because they are reading kind of co-mingled right now. The other item that we talked about was a little bit more definition on the ARC units that are coming up next and how they might be scope and sequenced out. We also had some dynamic conversation about some of the decisions that have happened with the implementation to include turning off the digital libraries. Because again, the way that we curate library materials is through a person, not just flipping a switch. And so just slowing down on some of the units and also integrating it with our current materials. So for example, if we already have a book room that has rich text related to autobiographies and biographies, adding other things doesn't necessarily follow our expertise on wanting to make sure that our students use what we already purchased. So again, we already have all of those things, we have them available, our teachers are familiar with them. So kind of when you first start looking at things and it sounds nice, and then when you look at it, whether or not we need it or use it was one of our conversations there. The other big item in my area is about summer school, and you'll hear more about that as we go through with a report later on in this evening. Summer school is continuing to be a dynamic. One of the things that's a little bit different is the fact that we can't lock in staffing until we have enrollment. So wanted to make sure that you knew that the packet will go out digitally before a little bit of the long weekend with the holiday. We find that when students have a day off of school, they tend to kind of engage with what was ever sent home on that Thursday. So we want to make sure that families are able to look at that packet. And then also so many families are starting to slap vacations and things like that. We will only staff for what is enrolled. So for example, we have some backups. We know that usually we need 2 sections of getting ready for first grade and having enough for just that core staff. And then we have on-call support staff if we need to add more. I keep pushing out another request for staff who would like to offer classes for enrichment. And we just added 1 more class yesterday. So even in the draft that you'll have, we'll have additional classes kind of change a little bit based on interest. If nobody chooses to take a course, then we'll shift it over and kind of move those things through. And we'll talk more about that when I present later. The last thing is something that we already celebrated, just a phenomenal capstone of our entire programs with that post-secondary fair. And when we talk about some of the feedback that was received from our vendors, both people who are looking to hire students, also our colleges, and even the patrons who are just kind of in and out, the professionalism of how our students carry themselves, whether they be freshmen, whether they be seniors, or whether they be students that have disabilities. Our students don't look any different. They carry themselves with quality questions. Our staff preps them to have engaging conversations. They're not opening lines of communication by saying, how much will I make? They didn't have hoodies or hats, they just kind of really looked, and that dress for success, that whole feel for the day is just an amazing opportunity. It was also neat to see some of our students who really know what they want to do, talking to the counselors and talking to some of the other people about their schedules. So I saw one junior hitting up her college that she wants to go to, and she's like, so I'm debating on if I should take this class or this class, and I know this will help me, but I'm just not sure and I can't fit it all in. And just great conversations that are beyond us, because once they do leave us, they really go to so many different pathways, and we can give them the base, but so great for them to engage with the experts. So thank you so much for everybody who did all of the work to make that happen.
Yeah, on the post-secondary fair, I just think it's great what we're doing, and the fact that we've become a place where the districts around us want to send their kids through shows the innovation that has come and how this is built over the years, and I'm just very proud of our district for doing that.
What's the most booths you've ever had? Because I felt like there were a lot last week.
This year,
This year?
85.
Yeah. I know there was a little dip for a couple of years, but I just thought it was really well attended.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we kind of dipped a little bit in COVID, but we kept it going every year, didn't we, Brian? Yeah, I mean, you did, I should say. You guys have really done a job, so.
In New London, and I know I said this to so many people, but I usually attend the career days as a vendor. So I see a lot of the kids in other districts coming through, not naming any of the surrounding districts or anything, but the way New London is prepared, the way their students are prepared, you guys, it is just, if you ever have an opportunity to go to another school to their career day, it is amazing what New London does. It really is. You guys are all setting the students up for success and really preparing them for outside of high school, and it's amazing to see because you don't really see that in other areas.
And comparing what we're doing
Mhm.
now to 12 or 15 years ago is a huge.
Yep.
Mr. Black. you
Sure,
had a
I want to
comment.
apologize. On page 9 is our district event calendar meeting schedule, and I didn't highlight that, but I need to just point reference underneath our March meetings. Those of you that are part of our facilities committee, we have a committee slated for the 27th at 4:30 prior to our monthly special meeting there for reference. And then in the month of April, just noting as we start moving, it's hard to think, with 15 inches of snow outside, but we are softball started today, I think. So spring events and what that means, our spring play, April 14th, 15th, and 16th, which we're all looking forward to, as well as various show choir performances on the 24th, and then our FFA annual chapter awards on April 30th. So we'll talk more about that as we get into it, but just wanted to highlight that facilities committee on the 27th of March. So thank you, Chris.
I had one thing I
Yes.
just wanted to bring up. I didn't know if you were taking questions or
Oh, I did.
observations, but one thing I just wanted to mention with the instructional committee and how we were sending it back to policy to delineate. I had been hearing in the community that we were manufacturing, looking at these books, and I just wanted to specify that a policy was followed and a procedure that went through, and it was a parent request to review them, and it went all the way up the food chain. So I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't just willy-nilly, we decided to look at these books, there's a pathway to follow. And she requested further action and all the steps were followed, so I wanted to iterate that.
Yes, absolutely. So this was an example of us getting to a level that came to board action, which hasn't happened in a long time. So oftentimes the first review is where it stops, but we had gotten to the appeal. So this was the first time that we had gotten to the appeal. So part of our discussion was, we haven't done this. How do we think it go? How did it go? That kind of thing, to just say, just kind of review where we were at. So thank you, Katie.
So that concludes our reports, and we are on to vouchers and receipts. Mr. Merkel.
Okay, for our voucher highlights for the month, we have Somerville. I also put ESSER expenditure comments on there. There were 3 that were on the first page, which is sorted from highest to lowest. One was for the ropes course at the high school. One is for our fall semester that we had at Rawhide. And then the other was for the start of those new line boards that the board approved. We're starting to put some of those in our schools as we finalize the purchasing process for the summer. We're trying to get them into the schools to prepare them for what they will look like. And we had a couple smart boards that weren't functioning well, so it was a good chance to start integrating those new line boards that we have board approved into the buildings. You can see under ESER two, there's less than $100,000 to claim for the year. And the receipt highlights for the month, we did receive more installments of the property taxes from individuals as they pay through their municipalities. There's a focus on energy receipt for rebates received from the middle school project that we applied for as a district, that we fill out the paperwork and get incentives for installing qualifying equipment in the building. I did want to note, there was no legal expenses to highlight for the month, but there will be one of note that you will see in the next vouchers for renting Lewis and Lacy. Yes, the board approved the transition to Von Briesen last summer, but every year our audit requires a review of outstanding legal claims from the prior fiscal year. So in the prior fiscal year, we had renting Lewis and Lacy as the board's attorney. And whenever you do your audit, they review and report, is there any outstanding litigation? Von Briesen wouldn't have been able to do that because they weren't our attorney for the board at that time. So just to note, when you see that, every attorney charges for that review. It wouldn't be just Renting and Lacy. It's Von Briesen's gonna charge for it next year. They all charge when they have to respond to work.
Questions for Joe?
Do you want to recap, like, you were speaking of ESSER funds, but like us stacking chairs Saturday night, like the new chairs came and how you used them and.
Yes, so the Pops concert was Saturday evening at the middle school, and the chairs that the board approved are already here. They've been used, and all comments that I heard from community members is they really like them and they're comfortable. I don't know if you sit in them for more than a couple hours, if a plastic chair is still comfortable, but great feedback so far. I don't know if you had anything, Ann, you want to share about the chairs?
Well, Adam and Logan, when they were setting up, had shared that they were used prior to the post-secondary fair, and I will say it looked amazing to have all matching sets of things when we're setting up for a large event, especially when we're inviting not only our families in, but community members and grandparents and other people who are attending from outside the community. It spruces things up and it makes things truly look like the class act that they are here in New London.
What did you used to do for chairs, like for that, event? When you rented them?
We could have used our own, we could have rented some. We just compile things to do what we can when we haven't had it in the past. The middle school, we likely would have used as many that we had on site. We could have brought them from other schools. One thing to note on the chairs, we did not buy carts. We did the high school metal shop fab them for us to use. And that works out great because the ones that we would have purchased, we're trying to figure out how to either get them in the elevator to get upstairs, store them, or move them around. And when you can customize them here, Logan had these of maintenance. He worked with them to build them for the size that we wanted, and that will help us in the long run because then they decided what caster wheels that they wanted on there to be able to move them back and forth. So we had ESSER funding approved to purchase the chairs, but we tried to make good decisions on how to transport them. The chairs itself would have been $2,800 if we would have bought enough of the carts there. And the tech ed department can make them at a fraction of the cost.
They looked pretty slick.
That's outstanding.
We're buying the material and they're supplying it.
Mhm.
And the expedition of the reshipment, I thought was like, oh, they're here. Like, we just approved them.
Okay, if there's no other questions for Joe, I'm open to a motion to approve expenditures in the amount of $1,358,061.91 as per the list of March 9th, 2023. So moved by John,
I'll second it.
seconded by Mark. We will have a roll call vote.
Katie Batten,
Yes.
Mark Grossman,
Yes.
John Heidemann,
Yes.
Holly Schweitzer,
Yes.
Terry Wagner,
Yes.
Mandy Wills,
Yes.
Chris Martenson.
Yes. Motion carries. So we will record receipts from the receipt register of March 9th, 2023 in the amount of $2,815,929.73. Any more things in the financial recap, Joe? Yes, sir. Okay. We'll move on then to unfinished business. And the only item we have in unfinished business tonight will be final approval of the revised proposals of policies that we had the first reading for the last month. The last meeting.
Right.
And this is our second reading. These are the policies that, there was an additional one we had a first reading on, but it got sent back to the policy committee for some more work. These are the ones that there were no suggestions for changes. Those are still open until this meeting. So,
Correct.
Mr. Black?
So the 5 policies that are noted, and everybody had to prep and preparing for tonight, all of the recommended changes that were shared at our previous meeting are intact with the noted items in yellow. Unless there's a pointed conversation on one of the 5 policies, I have no further discussion on them.
I'll be open to a motion, and if there's discussion, it can follow the motion to approve the policies as presented with the changes for policy 210, 221, 224, 230, and 252.
I'll make the motion.
Moved by Mark,
I'll second.
seconded by Terry. Discussion. Anybody have any issues with those policies? If not, we're open to a motion we will vote on this motion, I'm sorry. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carried. Those changes are now in effect. And unfinished business is now done. We'll move to new business. Review of the 2023 summer school program design. This is Seaver.
All right, I'm back. Looking through, I tried to include as much information as we could. Sincere gratitude to the coordinators from each level that helped put these things together. Again, really where this comes down to the board is I need help promoting these opportunities because we can't make staffing decisions until we know enrollment. I know some parents want to wait until the last minute. Some people wanted to register them last summer. So when we look at that, we just need to make sure that we understand that implications of some of those things. The elementary definitely is going to be continuing to be much of the same that we've seen in the past, a few different flavors of courses for exploratory. We found our sweet spot for getting ready. So our getting ready to 4K, our getting ready to 5K, first grade have always been a great program, especially for those families that are new to the district, looking to get those kindergarten and 4Kers kind of acclimated to some of the hidden rules of how to line up. Where is my locker? It's not a locker, it's a cubby, whatever we call it when they're real little. Those kinds of things. Camp Invention, I think everybody who has participated can attest to what a great opportunity we have with Camp Invention. In some of the cities, without partnering with the school districts, families are paying upwards of $300 and $400 like we started. And this way we are able to work through our summer school program. What's phenomenal about that is that our middle and high school students also join as camp counselors and guides to help lead that. So we talk about prepping our students for different pathways. That's a great place there. Middle school back in their own building, super excited about that. We're excited to see how students can kind of re-engage in their own building and maybe see those numbers kind of tick up a little bit. You look at some of the names of the programs there. Josh Murnane has also taken over coordinating just the athletics. It got a little muddy last year in feedback when grades 2, 3, and 4 were managed by one coordinator, and then the 5, 6, 7, 8 were by another one. So Josh is kind of coordinating that all together. So hopefully we're not competing with other programs and going through there. High school is going to be, again, much of the same with our credit recovery and credit attainment programs with some of our students who are deficient in some of their areas. That enrollment is a little bit different because we have to get through a semester to see which kids really need those credits to kind of go through. And then it really works like a workshop model. So every student is working on the content that they need to work on their own goals to kind of push through that. One thing that I want to spend a little bit of time on is the Rural Virtual Academy online courses. So I really we downplayed this the first summer, because we weren't sure how it was going to play out. These count as live courses. Kids are logging on from home and they're being taught by a live instructor. And they're counting credits. So they're earning credits and they're getting core instruction in some areas and classes that we wouldn't be able to offer. It's great for some of our students who want to do everything and can't do it all at the same time. It's great for some of our students who also need to protect their schedule during the year to have some time to study. So if they want to have a study hall, being able to do some of those things off there. We do have an added layer for our credit earning students for a couple reasons. So there's a separate form that I didn't include in the packet because we're still working through it with our administrators that really helps our families know that this does count. So the one thing is we do pay for these courses because it's an off-site teacher. We pay $150. But last year we did have 2 kids just kind of say they were going to do it and then didn't do it. And I think part of it is they just thought it was kind of like an option, but not a commitment. So we added a layer of commitment just so that families understand, you understand the cost of this class, you understand that they need to log in daily. So if they miss 3 classes, they don't get the credit. Because it's not something that can be fluid. It's only the 4 weeks during June that are there. Again, I'm not looking at a ton of students getting enrolled in there, but I did want to take some time to explain that to you. And then we did use the same language that we used to use in our, and Terry, I know you were there when we used to have youth options, and we had that little disclaimer, students who enroll but then do not finish. It just says may or may not incur costs. The other reason that agreement is there is if they don't have reliable internet, we would work through figuring out how to make sure they do have that connection. So if you do look at the attachments, those are the shorter flyers that are attached at the back of the packet. And as you look at those classes, another thing to make sure if they would go directly to the Rural Virtual Academy, they would see the credit attainment a little bit different for the high school. We do not offer credit for driver's ed. So the driver's education that's in there, just remembering that we do not offer credit, but it is still an option. And then some of the other little crossouts, for example, personal and family finance. They would get a financial literacy credit, but they would not, I believe in that one, they were giving a English credit or something like that. It didn't fit our guide. So we cross-referenced what we currently give credits for and I looked that over. The dual credits that are in that flyer are partnered with a new college for us. So because Rural Virtual Academy works with Northeast Technical College or NTC, instead of Fox Lake Tech, it would be a new one. So again, we would be looking at that. And then middle school, our middle school includes 5th grade, but RVA's middle school starts at 6. So again, just that, which is very similar to our packet that you have in front of you. We keep our 5th graders in our Lincoln program because they haven't been to the middle school yet. It just seems to be an easier transition that way as well. So as always, I have more written that I hope to say, and I'm going to give you time for questions instead of.
Questions for Danielle?
Yeah, if a student chooses to participate in RVA, do they have to have their own computer, tablet, or Chromebook? Do we provide one, or do they have to have their own?
We are at the point that we keep Chromebooks from summer or over the summer. So they would keep the Chromebooks. So all of the students that are involved in this are 6th grade or higher, and they keep their devices over the summer. So they would have to have access to that device.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
When will you be sharing a link so that we can help?
So after you approve, should you decide to approve that we can move forward, we have a few more edits. We would definitely share the things that are ready. And then this final things, we'll put the disclaimers on there that, again, due to staffing, but we're looking to have it be by the 16th.
Okay.
So that when we have no school on this week on Friday, that it's ready to go. So those links will be live. Opening for registration will be, I believe it's May 1st. is it? No, May 1st is the last day, sorry. We are closing registration on May 1st. Let me look back at this. Yeah, so, enrollment for Rural Virtual Academy, they should be talking to their counselors as soon as they would like to. Enrollment for the other ones, we are gonna open on April 1st. So they can preview the book for the rest of this month, and then April 1st is open. We say we try to close registration on May 1st. That's not truly closed, but that does mean we're gonna fix our FTEs. So we're gonna fix our staffing. So I do know we had to turn a few families away last year to a basketball or a thing like that because they called the Sunday before. And due to staffing and limits, we're gonna try to, keep that the way that it is. They went on a waiting list. They were actually able to make it. But with the staffing, we wanna make sure that we have a good experience for those students. One other item to note for the team, you noticed that last year we cut off Fridays. This year we did go down to a 3-week window instead of a 4-week. There is some possibility that we will lose a little bit of our enrollment minutes because we're cutting off a week of minutes. But as far as staffing and also engagement, we're willing to take that because we were able to get a few more staff members willing to offer it. When we look at the surveys that we put out to families, to students, to everybody else, everybody's had an opinion, and there is a lot of scatter plots. So we'll continue to review that. There's some question again about moving to June so that they can have some time off, and then there's other districts that do it in August. But with the facilities and activities that we have, August becomes a little bit of a nightmare. The middle school band and choir will still do August, but they're not part of this enrollment because they're automatically enrolled. The same with our marching camp at the high school in August.
Question, Danielle, this is the first summer that we've offered RVA as a summer school option, right?
No, we have offered it in the last few years
Okay,
as elective only. And really we're kind of exploring it and see how it went. It wasn't part of the, it was a link in my director report because we weren't invited until a little bit later. Last year we had, I believe, 14 students participate.
do you see that our current steps as a way to enrich how many choices people have for taking things in the summer then?
Absolutely, and I also think there's no way, at most of these classes wouldn't run in any summer program unless you had two from a bunch of different schools to make that happen. And because they have the legislative background on meeting all the criteria for a live class via online, they're able to do that. We are not considered an online charter, so we can't do that. So I think it offers another option.
Do you, how are you promoting this with our families so that they are gonna be aware that we have additional offerings this year?
Well, it'll be first when we add that out, and then each of our principals at both the middle and the high school have worked, we've already met with our counselors, we're looking through that. The counselors at the high school are actually looking at students first, our seniors and juniors who weren't able to fit a class in, and maybe looking to go from there, so looking that way. But promotions is definitely going to be something that's on the ticker. It's been a little undercurrent because we wanted to make sure that we also don't jump before we present to you. Another place that we're looking is they're doing a graduation audit where we are looking at who might need. Nobody wants to take, if they didn't pass an English class the first time, nobody wants to take two at the same time. So looking at some of those bubbles and looking at that. And then one that's always been from our middle school is our students who either enroll from a different district or did not get their health requirement. So when we offer health in 7th and 8th grade, and students are coming, for example, from Emmanuel. So all of our Emmanuel students who come from Emmanuel to the high school are required to get health a different way. This allows them to do that because they weren't here for 7th and 8th grade to get health through our middle program. So I think our counselors and I think our principals will definitely be there, and then we'll continue to promote that as we do all of our summer programs.
Any other questions for Mrs. Siebert on December's.
You said earlier you're hoping to get this out by March 16th.
Which is Thursday.
It'll be out before Thursday, so yes, Thursday this week, we're hoping.
So do you require a approval from us for that? It
Um,
doesn't say we do right now.
We don't, all I do is present to you guys.
Okay.
This is, the one that you actually approve is the staffing. And so when we bring the staffing to you, but we wanted the awareness from you on, maybe we can do it this way or whatever.
Just a question, because I
Yeah.
thought you said we approved it tonight. It's saying no motion, so
Yeah,
I just want to make sure.
Yeah, I don't speak Robert's rules, so I should watch out for a couple of those words as I say
I
that.
didn't hear anybody say no. so-
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes. So we will get those links updated and out by the end of the week. And then as we can, we'll promote those opening for registration on the 1st.
Will that show up on the app, the links?
So, yes,
So when it gets pushed out to Facebook, summer school offerings, it'll
Yes.
automatically.
It'll automatically go
It'll
there.
periodically get pushed out to the app for that. So if you have the app, you'll get that. When it's pushed out to Facebook, it'll grab it and periodically send it out to it.
But the parents won't get an individual email saying,
we usually do. We
You do?
usually do
Okay.
Sky Alerts and Skywards too.
all right,
It's the careful consideration of not doing too many before it's actually open, because then you just have a whole bunch of, I can't get the link to work because they only they only click on the blue lines without actually reading. And
They're normal.
like all of us.
Yeah.
So it's informational and save the date first, and then we'll be moving into, it's open. Last year, we offered to have help with anybody who needed help for Skyward registering, and we didn't have anybody come. But another thing that's happening behind the scenes is our bilingual population will definitely be working to reach out to those families to really walk them through, even with translation, wanting to make sure that they're engaged in the process and making sure that they have the support they need. Another thing that happens behind the scenes, just so you know, I'm really proud to be in a community where everybody's a bulldog. We've already crossed these dates with Jim Thorpe to talk about when he should have open swim for the pool, so kids can go to class during this time, and then we don't have to worry about what we're gonna do with them later. And so that we're not competing with those same things, so he looked at the pool schedule. We've been working with, is it Morgan at the city, to talk about that program and Parks and Rec. We've also talked about the partnership with the Washington Center and the usage there, so again, that we're all working together and not against. And we always talk to our two big churches on their vacation Bible school and give them the option. They were still debating whether or not they were gonna work around. We offered, they did not want to be the same week as Camp Convention, but they weren't sure exactly what they were going to do with that. But just wanting to let you know, that's all, we continue to try to work together so that none of us have to figure out childcare. So, thank you very
Any other
much.
questions? Thank you. Moving on to budget update, Mr. Marker.
Okay, the purpose of the budget update is really twofold tonight. The first is to provide an update on this current fiscal year operating budget. So it's the 22-23 school year that runs from July 1st to June 30th. The supporting documents in the package show that there is a favorable projection through the end of the fiscal year. There's still a lot of things to happen though. The data that I'm sharing is through February 28th. We still have a couple of months of significant utilities. I think of utilities is there's still winter weather that's out there. There's still snow removal processes that take place, and we still have fuel costs for our buses as we transport students to school. Those are significant components of a budget that we're factoring in one of the past costs then. There's also a revenue that I wish we had better resolution to, but it is the same in all school districts. We're trying to determine our Medicaid revenues because it's based upon cost reports that come either in prior years or also in current years. And the revenue for that is delayed, but it is a significant portion of our revenue budget that we get throughout the year, but our biggest payment does come in June. And we also have mid-year resignations that impacted our salary and benefit budget. You would know that as the board because you approved those resignations that came forward. So the nuts and bolts of this is, we're trending towards a favorable forecast to the end of the year. If there is a potential surplus for the board to allocate, the first recommendation that we might have is to share an allocation to the Sugar Bush project. It could potentially reduce the borrowing or your operational expenditures for that particular budget. When we approve the project, we share that moving forward. As payment options came up, we would share them. So that would be a spot that you could allocate some of the funds or a portion of it. It just depends on what you would decide to do as a board. Before I move into the second part of the topic summary, any questions on our year-to-date through February 28th?
What would be some examples of the Medicaid reimbursement?
So in our special education department, they have billable services. So Candy and her team work through documentation of student services. We submit those in a cost report, and then that cost report is reviewed, and then Medicaid revenue, if eligible, is transferred back to the school district.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So there's transportation logs we submit. They have services that they're providing students in the schools, and depending on our ratios, we do get reimbursements.
Thanks.
To really continue to talk about the 23-24 biennium budget, right after we finished the board packet, we were made aware of some of the listening sessions that are coming up throughout the state. You may have gotten that legislative alert for you as well. They're going to be located throughout the state. There's one in Waukesha, another in Eau Claire, Wisconsin Dells, and Minocqua. And as I shared in our January update, without spendable revenue increases to the school district, it does present challenges for long-term sustainability in the future. I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but a 2-year freeze to anyone's revenue budget does create sustainability challenges, especially with the cost of increases that do go up inside the budget. I don't know if this is a great example or not, but I was talking to one of my colleagues, and as they were talking to their legislative liaisons and people who represent them, they talked about, just imagine if you had your own business and it said, you're selling a product and the maximum you can earn for that product is X in 1 year. You can't go past there. That's where our revenue limit is, but every school district's using that. So the hope is that people realize that it matters so much of the increase to school districts that the $250 or $350, yes, is an increase, but it's, if you divide that over 3 years, it's not what CPI is right now. So that was part of our discussion in the back with our total compensation committee is the board wants to be able to provide an increase to staff, but if our state budget doesn't reflect a big enough increase, it puts our long-term sustainability into challenges. Also, there's been a lot of discussion about telling your story as a school district. So a couple things that I did want to share with you as you may talk to constituents. Question may come up, how does your district deal with poverty? Do you have poverty? Yes, we have 40% of our students qualify for free and reduced meals. What about special education? Do you have special education students in the district? Yes. 18% of our students qualify for special education services. And that is a significant portion of our transfer each year. So each year we transfer over $2 million from the general fund to the special education fund to make that balance. So all school districts have to make sure there's a net zero in the special education budget for 27 each year. So we transfer over $2 million each year into the special education fund. Also, there's discussion about, do you have students who are bilingual? Yes. We have students that have ESL program or other language barriers because they just need to work on their English skills. Those have expenditures inside of our school district as well. So diversity is something that inside your budget does have a cost. We spent a lot of time talking about how we celebrate our post-secondary options for our students. We want to have those options for students to be able to select, and that is important to New London. It's important to our economy, and having those programs and class sizes is important. You look at our middle school and elementary schools as well. Without spendable revenues, it puts pressure on the class sizes that we have inside of our schools. And the higher the class size, sometimes you're not able to provide that direct instruction that our teaching staff would like to be successful. So, not to share anymore, but one more important thing I think that many of you have seen is New London is one of 124 school districts that's locked in at $10,000 for people to spend. And that's just the revenue limit formula. The only way you exceed that is through a referendum. And yes, we exceeded that through a referendum, but it's for facility-related projects. It wasn't for operating for some of the items that I shared. I think it's important to advocate whenever you can talk to anyone, whether it's your neighbors or constituents or other board members as well as you see them. United Front is important to advocate, and I always feel like sometimes people don't realize the extent of what happens inside of a school district. So encourage them, if they ever want to come see what schools do each day, we're happy to show them and provide examples if you want to ask questions. That's all I had for the budget update, unless any of you had additional questions about our current year again or looking forward into the next 5 years.
This may be more towards Scott. When our state representative Peterson was at a meeting with the city, we participated. He indicated they would be coming to each school district.
I have not reached out in that regard there. I can give them a follow-up to.
And I think the other thing, Joe, that is challenging is we don't control all of our costs. So we don't get to tell the electric company, geez, we're flat and you only can charge us this much, or the gas company, or any of those fixed requirements that we have. That's been a huge challenge to us. Any district that's stuck. And I would say, I pretty well guarantee these 124 were stuck 20 years ago when this went in. And they've been stuck there ever since. And nobody's ever made an effort to balance this out. I heard Mr. Peterson comment that, well, if we change the formula, there'd be winners and losers. We've been a loser for 20 years. I'd kind of like to be a winner for a while, just to see what it might be like. But apparently, they don't have that fortitude to make that decision.
And not that what's been in the news cycle is necessarily anything of what's gonna be in the end product. But what disappoints me is, it seems heavy on talk of new initiatives and new programs, but really light on the idea of funding what we're already doing and what's already, we're short on paying for it. And that's a little disingenuous to me, but who knows what the end product is gonna look like, so.
So Scott, was that a big surprise that DPI and governor's budget proposal didn't have an increase in both per student? I mean, based upon what you had in our information.
Well, they had an increase built in, but it just wasn't at the rate of inflation of what we're seeing at that 8%.
I guess that's what I meant.
Yeah.
you know? Given the fact that 124 districts represent about 30% of the districts across the state, it's not like there's 10% of us that are stuck in this situation, right? There's a lot of districts.
So 3 years ago, they made that adjustment to adjust the low spending districts, which our district benefited. And now now we're flat again, all right? And so until they choose to reauthorize or bring up that lower limit again, we would be in a very similar position. And with the current funding recommendations that DPI released early on, you know, with that 350, 650, over the 2-year biennium, that's not hitting our inflationary costs this year. So I think that's where Joe and our compensation committee, we were talking today, we just need to be very in tune as this budget is developed through the state, where they settle on that per pupil, okay? And if there are other ways that they choose to support funding, as Joe mentioned, with say special ed funding, which ultimately trickles down, you know, into our bottom line budget and how that could help us in the long run there. There may be other avenues which artificially bring that limit up, which frees up funds with that. So, you know, the listening sessions are great. Our CISA locally is putting together a universal message, you know, so that it's sharing those similar stories within, there are low spending districts within our district, giving that voice that we are here. It's not just in the corners of the state, we're everywhere. We're located everywhere throughout the state.
You know, one of the sessions I went to at the convention talked about this specifically, and they were looking at a minimum target to be proposed of 11.5 per student, and what ideally would like to see would move that up to 12.5. So for it to come back at 10 again is really disappointing.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and they had a gentleman there from UW-Madison that went into it in depth about the inequities and that, I don't know, were you in that session, John?
I popped in on that one, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that was a good session. I mean, that guy really knew his stuff on how to get out of this problem that we've got with inequity within the state. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people controlling people's careers in the legislature that are making sure the legislators don't listen to that data. Just,
You know, the school funding and funding education equally has been, it's continuously on the horizon. Is there a better way to fund public education? And I think attempts have been made to try to break it down and build it back again. But one thing that has been sustainable is that it hasn't changed. And so it's going to take a monumental approach to try to recreate what that looks like. Because for every 120 some low spending districts, you've got the districts of high spending.
Yeah.
Okay. And they're going to say we're experiencing the same 8% inflation right now at this same time with costs and expenditures that have been established in their everyday norms. Much like a few years ago when there were districts around our area that said, hey, that's not fair, you know, because you're not equally touching all districts throughout. So if something like that comes forward, I look forward to hearing more about what that might look like. But there'll be pushback on the other end as well. I can almost guarantee that.
Oh, yeah.
They could pay us all the same.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah.
Geez, wouldn't that be unique?
Come on now.
Hey, I'm just saying, it's just another idea.
Oh, when you mentioned those locations, is that what you're saying CISA 6 is attending, and which one? And is there like, I didn't know what you were asking
You know,
for.
those locations, and we have done this before,
Yeah.
you can go to sign up to speak. A couple of years, when it was in Berlin, I remember I went to speak, and you have, was it 90 seconds?
90 seconds, right?
And you read something about your school district. I don't know if that has as much impact as, you know, inviting our local legislators in to share, because you get more than 90 seconds to talk to them, where, yes, it is recorded. You know, you go and speak, it's recorded, broadcasted through the state,
Wisconsin I.
like you can do that if you wish, but when you get more than 90 seconds, you do get to share your story. And to provide some, I understand where the state government is challenged a bit because the prior budgets have had increases to K-12 education, but the priority was not spendable revenue, it was tax relief. So it's another reason why New London's taxes are at 555. The increase in revenue went to equalization aid, and you can't spend more, so you get more aid, less taxes. So it's provided a lot of relief to taxpayers throughout the state of Wisconsin, which is important. You as a board know that when you're passing your budget or asking for referendums, you want the community to feel valued with their input into your local control and also the local taxpayers' dollars going as well. But when you didn't have a choice as a board to say, okay, that's great, but we also need this because we have this, it doesn't match. But again, that's why school districts struggle, like Scott was saying. One thing that has never changed is this: every school district is struggling with the disparity of the revenue limit just hurts you with, well, yeah, if the board decided, yeah, you want to have $6 because you're doing it next year, you can't do it. You have to pass a referendum to do so. And then if you fail the referendum, they say, well, nope, you can't go back for
2 years.
2 years.
I think it is, yes.
So
And you will have a penalty to the next year if you go to referendum and fail. But however, if you're down around 6, it's a lot easier to pass a millage than if you're up around 12, I mean, as far as showing people what the needs are. Joe, you mentioned 3 factors that make our costs bigger. One was the poverty rate, 40% have free and reduced lunches, the percentage of special education students at 8%. You mentioned ESL. 18%? Yeah. Is that what I said? Okay. And then the ESL you also mentioned. Is it your opinion that the federal revenue that we get to do ESL from that particular program does not offset the cost of putting on English as a second language?
Correct, because you can't spend it on staffing.
Oh, you can, okay. What do you spend it on, just materials?
Curriculum resources.
Okay, so what would our, do you have a number for what our percentage would be of students who require ESL?
We currently had 100 students this year that took the Access for ELL test.
Okay. Any other questions for Joe? Thank you, Joe.
So just to summarize, what can we do? Like, it didn't sound like any of these 90-second locations were great. I just always like to come away with the action steps. Letters, like, invite, obviously you said Kevin back
Sure.
in, can we
Yeah.
pull up the flagpole from him? I mean, I'm just trying to think, like, what are actionable steps?
I think
Thinking we're
what
not
Terry
getting
brought
more
up, bringing them back here to talk to us, and they said they would do it.
Yeah, he made a very clear statement, they would be around to see us.
Yeah,
He and our senator.
So he needs
State
an
senator.
engraved invitation, sounds like? I mean, seriously.
I think-
what
I
can we
think we're
do?
that far away, I mean.
Yeah.
Highway goes east and
So,
west. It's
Should we do
easy to
smoke
find.
signals? I'm serious, like, what can we do?
I can call out, and I've been waiting patiently with them, but just to say, we'd like to take you up on that opportunity
Yeah,
that you
sure.
said, that you would be willing to stop in and visit with our board.
I would think that should be a request from the board.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Not just
saying, like,
you.
make a resolution, yeah.
So are you making a motion to have a
I'll make a
resolution?
motion
Yeah, I'll second
to
that.
extend an invitation to the senator and representative for
Is there a
their
second?
statement
I'll second it.
to meet
Yeah.
with us.
Second by Katie.
All right.
Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. I would also add that the committee chairs really, even though they, neither of those are committee chairs for education, the committee chairs for education really should feel like they work for the whole state because they're a committee chair. I think it helps to call the committee chairs of the Senate and the Assembly. And register, they keep track of those things. They get a lot of calls from.
Or you can email them. They have,
You can email.
their information is readily available on the internet.
So quite often I forward out that daily article, those articles of school-related news. Just and I know you peruse through them and you maybe catch one or two that catch your eye. But if there is one or two, really pay attention to our stories that we're sharing tonight, what others are sharing that same story, and better understanding, because I think the more we know about what others' challenges are as well, it just allows us to talk and speak that same similar language when we do that opportunity to speak with, whether it be legislators or an email to somebody that might be influencing, or just a neighbor that wants to know why and what with that. A lot of value articles in there.
Aren't there two other opportunities for talking to the legislators within the next
Yes.
month?
At
We've got
the CISA opportunities,
The CISA breakfast, when's your next one?
that would be in the month of April.
April, and then we've got the day down at Madison.
So I believe
The
that's the
Wild
22nd of
March.
March.
Right,
So that's this next week. And I've attended those in the past, and maybe some of you have as well. I believe I think they take a deadline right up to the day before.
I've had some very one-sided discussions with Mr. Olson when he was the senator and headed the education committee.
But you were actually able to talk to some of the
Well,
legislators.
I was talking, yes.
He was not listening.
So what they do is they give you some time in the office of your representative and senator. Then they make time to go in and speak to them or their staffers if they're not available to share the local
It's
threat.
typically 2 to 4 or 5 districts will
Go
go in
at
at
that.
one time.
Yep.
And
Right.
I believe you have 15 or 20 minutes, as I recall. It's not a lengthy period, but
Is that of interest of anyone to attend that or want to go down and be part of that day?
Is there a way to encourage our CISA representative to maybe a little less kid gloves as far as the comments and what we're asking for, a little more
Sure. So one
to
of
the,
our
to the
CISA,
point?
yeah, our
because-
CISA does a great job with entertaining our local legislators from our 42 district region. And we really do. And this is something that we've been doing for many years where our last session, it was a little light attended as far as our representatives and senators. But typically it's a think tank. They want to know what our problems are, what our challenges are so that they can take them. And we've seen, action steps come out of that. But Ted's involvement with the Capitol and his conduit in there really is, it's on the plus. It's not a delta. And he does have those connections. And we've been at a legislative update where the governor just walks in one time. It's that type of connectivity through the years. I remember he turned around and here comes Scott Walker walking in one day. And he said, oh yeah, he might show up today. And there he was. So it is a conduit that is there.
And all I'm saying is the simpler the message,
Yeah.
the shorter, the more to the point, the more people listen. And a simple, we're just asking you to be fair and pay us all the same.
Yep. Right.
That
Well, I mean-
that message might resonate a little more than if it's this many pages long. That's all.
It'd be interesting to get together with some other districts, whether it be when we're attending the CISA breakfast, or if we would go down to Madison and get a group of them that are in the same boat. And we're all speaking the same language, kind of like what you were saying, John. And so,
Right.
we're going in there with some solidarity, and there's no competition between the 4 or 5 districts that are in that legislator's office at that time.
Right. Our CISA discussion, typically we go prepared in to talk about 2 or 3 items and they're asking for, like one session that was on special ed, how much do you spend within, or how much you transfer from your typical Fund 10 budget to special ed at the end of the year when that transfer has to take place. They wanted, and they had, some understood it, some had no idea. Again, just like board members, you have new representatives and new senators, they come in with skill sets at varying levels, and it's our job to tell the story as effectively as we can within. So typically we're going in and we're empowered. Danielle joined me last time when we were talking curriculum, specifically on reading initiatives and how districts are working to support that within. So that they want to know, and we're doing our best to share what that information is and keep it relevant and short and to the point.
Is there a way to somehow link the activity of those 124 districts together?
That's what I was thinking, John.
I
How we form a consortium with
Right.
them to
mean, we're kind of stuck,
speak as a voice.
we're kind of
Yeah.
stuck in CISAs with varying size
Yeah.
schools that necessarily don't represent us. How could we do that?
Yeah.
Because sometimes the larger voices in a certain CISA drowned out a smaller district.
So one way to try to accomplish that is to write a resolution, okay, or a statement, to the 127 school districts that are low spending, and having boards sign on to that type of language where if, we feel that all low spending districts should be brought up to, therefore, so on, so on, so on. And the power of other school districts in Lang's position is, hey, we support that. And you have boards that say, yes, we support that, and then ultimately goes to the representatives and the senators for, consideration. So,
That does exist. It's the Association of Equity and Funding. There was a breakout session at WASB.
That's
had
the
that.
session, yeah, and that's,
So, and we have signed on to that because we get notices as a school district that you are one of the districts. Do you support equal
Yep.
increases for the low revenue limit school districts? School districts since 1992-93 have been at this number, so we do support that association. We have a membership fee that we pay each year to True. It's about $500. And that helps, like John was saying, condense the message with the same size school district, because then it is throughout the entire state. If you are one of those eligible school districts, and they do lobby and advocate on behalf of those school districts for that participation. I don't know if the voice is heard as loud as some others though, because it's a nonprofit, if you will, lobby for the process. Because we're paying the dues to help fund the lobbying efforts.
Is it a 501c4 or 501c3?
I could look, but I'm not sure. It's
Usually if
the
it's-
AEF
If it's a
Association.
C4, they can promote, actively legislation. If it's a C3, they have to take a lower profile.
I would have to believe it would be more powerful if every school district was listed on that and then all members signed it and sent it in. Instead of having lobbyists come in, because they're usually dismissed before they arrive, unless they're bringing money with them. But, I think what's really starting to make this critical is we've been at this for 20 years with no adjustment really to speak of. I mean, they stopped adjusting for inflation in '08. So we've been not paid any additional funds to cover those uncontrollable costs for 15 years, approximately. And we've been stuck in this bottom. What's really disturbing to me is if there were districts that were doing a good job fiscally managing their districts, they have been penalized for that for 20 years.
for 30 years. That went into effect in 1993.
Yeah, you're
Yeah,
right, it's 30 years.
yeah,
No
it
wonder I
was,
feel so bad about it.
and it was supposed to sunset after 5 years.
No, but they put it in
And then-
permanently 2 years, they didn't wait 5 years.
5 years, they
Passed it in 93 and 95, they said, we're gonna keep this forever because we like it. And now they're sitting on $7 billion of surplus.
Just goes to
So I don't know how to get them to recognize that you've been punishing people for a long time. And, kudos to the boards that have sat here and the people that have run the district over those times. Because to manage under those circumstances for 30 years and still be a very viable district is credit to them. I give zero credit to Madison on that.
Okay, so we had a motion, right? Do we have to decide on what we're saying? for your, but like John said, keep
We had
it
a
simple.
motion to
Contact-
invite
to
Mr.
invite,
Peterson
Yeah,
and
we did pass.
Oh, I thought we were also doing one to send a resolution to make, like in addition, okay, sorry. I know we
Yeah,
did
I
it
would,
to,
I would be okay with that too.
I'm, just like you said with the simple, like we could start it for the 124 districts and then keep it really simple, like you just said.
Do we want to wordsmith it and bring it back in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
yeah,
Let's,
we have
two-
time for that.
let's do that. Okay. Are we ready to move the agenda, folks? If so, we'll move to item 7C, review and potential approval of instructional minutes and possible makeup days. Mr. Black.
Sure. One thing we do have plenty of is that snow. Over the past several weeks here. And as shared in the topic summary, this year we've exceeded now our inclement days and or days where we weren't in session. If you remember back in the month of October, we had that one day of our electrical service breaker failure at the high school, which does add into this as well. Long story short, in your topic summary, there's a recommendation to adjust our school calendar with recognition of the final day of school from Thursday, June 1st to Friday, June 2nd. And then with today's 2-hour delay this morning, has exceeded it a bit further. And if the board would be inclined to recognize a potential adjustment of minutes to the district starting on Monday, March 22nd of 5 minutes. At the end of the day, we would be able to recapture the approximate three and a half hours, which then would meet our remarks within all of our buildings. We would communicate that effectively through the buildings with parents to know that our end date at the end of the day would be extended 5 minutes to do just that.
To get discussion going, is there a motion to reestablish the school calendar as Mr. Black has presented?
I'll
Moved
second
by
it.
Holly, seconded by Mandy. Discussion, questions?
That original last day of school would have been a half day for students.
It was a full day.
It was a
It
full
was
day.
a full day, yeah.
Okay.
It was a full day,
So
correct.
then this would be a full day.
Yep, it would be, correct.
And does it extend the staff's obligations?
So we meet on Wednesday as an 18th, and that's one of the topics that we would look at, to how we would look at that professional development obligation. Just very high level, looking at the month of June, creating some flexibility to recapture that in the month of June is our initial thought to do
Because
that.
that's what
That's what the second was
the second
intended
was
for, to
intended
check out
for.
all of those end of year processes that take place, and if there is a directive or an expectation, whether it be curriculum or safety or any other element that we put into the end of the year expectations, that's typically when it would be shared. So looking to build some flexibility into that day, and then giving our building principals and director teams some flexibility in how to capture that in the month of June. That's the initial thought.
Do they like that better than like, say, like Easter Monday, just because people have trips planned already? Or I'm just thinking of like, what, do you give them
Right, are you able to
options, or-
capture it beforehand? So I did think of that, and that is definitely an option to do that, but with our staffing requests of planning of being out of district, first thought was this Friday. Well, okay, we have X amount of staff that have plans to be out of town, not only them, but students and families as well. And that Easter break, it's the same thing. People have planned accordingly within.
I was just thinking they may also have planned Friday, June 3rd.
Correct,
But you said it's a staff obligation anyway, I thought.
More
Correct.
time to readjust.
Yeah.
but yes, there are, I'm sure there are some that have plans on that Friday as well. But the one thing within our calendar, the makeup days, that is something that's been part of since the day we put it out. Designated makeup days have always been listed on here.
Oh, okay.
So as a marker, as a potential, and this year's obviously been extraordinary with the snow days that are out there.
Let's hope we don't get more.
So in the event we do get more,
And it's-
We'll be back here.
have we thought about doing what other districts are doing as far as the virtual? Or, I mean, not that the staff even has to teach virtually, but at least
Right.
have something assigned on their Chromebook for them
Yeah,
to
the
do at home.
asynchronous or whatever they call it.
Right,
Yep, so that definitely is something that we'll continue to look at, and not to say you're building in potential inequities amongst the different levels within.
With internet,
From,
you mean?
from internet
Right.
accessibility and or expectations at the elementary level versus middle school and high school. You know, I don't even want to say this, but I will, you know, when you think back a couple of years ago when
It
we
was
had students
awful.
home, how the difficult it was not only for our students at times, all right, but as well our youngest learners, and then the expectations that went with that, where whether it be a parent, guardian, or whoever that might have been supporting them to fulfill those expectations. And currently, when we have a snow day, we'll call it right now, the expectations are a little different, all right, and that person of support for that family, where that does change some of the dynamics. I agree, Mandy, that as we prepare for this next year, we've been sampling some other models that are out there. And quite frankly, our requirements at each of our various levels are different. Elementary students are expected to receive the fewest number of hours over a year, 1,151 compared to our high school that has 1,133. So there's different hour allotment within. Again, the equity piece of not only our students, what we would look for, but our staff as well. So that expectations here, individuals know and they're held accountable to what that looks like. So that's the piece. But then yes, as well, that internet capability, for sure, that'll always be an element that if we're saying that students need to use their tool
Right.
when they're at.
And not that I'm opposed to snow days. I mean, I think that's part of being in school. You gotta have, there were
I am
districts, the first, I know, right? There were districts where the first snow day, they were doing virtual on the screen, and I'm like,
Yeah.
where'd the snow days go?
Right. And it could be a hybrid of both, you know, when you built in
Right.
what this looks like. Because ultimately, these are student learning days that students are missing out on. And our staff is working tremendously hard to play catch up on those days.
Right.
And I know that in some of the expectations, staff are doing a great job as well of saying, if we're not here tomorrow, these are things you can be looking at. So when you're at home, whether it's another chapter or taking an assignment a little bit or some peer review, or even if it's just dialogue with their peers within, that's becoming more and more common as far as instructional delivery.
So if there is and I know the answer to this already, but if we can see like, hey, there's a good possibility tomorrow there's not gonna be school, can the teachers like have the homework ready and that just?
I think to an extent, you know, remembering that our elementary students don't take Chromebooks home on a daily
Right.
basis. So that poses one challenge, so that what those expectations are at that level are just gonna look different.
Completely.
So you're saying that it wouldn't count?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, if we know tomorrow, here's what I need you guys to do at home,
Our high
taking
school,
into
middle
account
school,
that, right,
absolutely. It
Yep.
becomes much more realistic to do that. That's going on now, you
Yep.
know, with students and how they're learning. Expectations in those buildings are just that for Google Classroom.
So Nina did this. And I have a friend who teaches at Nina, and I said, what did you do with the elementary kids? And the response was, we asked them to read a book.
oh, there you go.
And that was their day, and it counted. And,
Sure.
you know, because I think it was because of what we're talking about. And even the other classes, the high school and the middle school classes, it wasn't like a full 6 hours of being in front of your computer.
So there's definitely a game that is played
Yeah.
with this process. And where my thoughts are, if we choose to go down that path, that it's well established, the expectations have been thoroughly communicated well in advance. And then when we look for that accountability factor, I don't want it to be a game. You know, I want it to be something that we can lean on, that there are expectations that do drive some, you know, educational enhancement on that day. And that's what we would have to design. And I'm sure there's some that are more rigorous than others, but from a standpoint on the accountability from our state, when they look at days right now, virtual instruction comes with very wide open parameters as to how you can count that and still be in session, you know. And that equity piece among staff is something, you know, we had that engagement survey, and I could guarantee there'll be some feedback as that equity piece of as there should be,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
within that.
What
as
you're
well.
saying is you don't want it to be a situation where we check the box of compliance, but we lose learning.
Well, ultimately, I mean, right now, we are losing that learning and our staff are working due diligence
We
to
wanna do
recover that.
Everything we can to recover.
Right, and
So,
so,
but you won't recover it in this last day. School is done.
Right,
I mean, report cards have been made up, school is done.
and the kids are checked out.
Yeah.
Like they're, like
Yeah.
they
I
are.
mean, I really think it.
But whatever your last day, right? That's-
Right.
I
because
think
Right.
it merits looking at for a couple of reasons. First, I do think you can build it to where it can provide a learning experience at all levels. But also, we could potentially shorten our school year a little bit. And I think if we ask the pros and cons of, would you rather be out the end of May or the 2nd of June? I think you'll probably get about 90% say, I'd rather be out the end of May. If I didn't have to make these days up, I think it's worth exploring to see if you can find it, because I can't see where districts won't continue to move that way to assist with their calendar. And like I said, adding on, even when I was in school, and that's a long, long time ago, that day was, you might as well just send me home.
this is an instructional obligation though with hours that.
I understand that.
Within that, for this time here. I hear what you're saying.
And I think
Within
that the internet access will continue to get less and less and less now, as much of a problem. I mean, when you look at what's happened just in the area here,
Yep.
within the last 2 years, people that I know that lived in dead spots 2 years ago, they have internet access now, and I think the technology will eventually.
Didn't a new
Make that go away.
tower go up in Reedfield just
Around the Beach City area, I believe there's one.
So they're working on the dead zones, but
Right.
I think it's worth at least an exploration and maybe some report back at some point in time as the calendar's set next year, to say, how do we do this to benefit students, but also keep our year as short as we can, because students are in school a long time, and that once this 15 or so inches of snow melt, they'll be anxious to be out.
So are we ready to vote on the motion, folks?
Yes.
Does that include the addition of the 5 minutes starting on March,
It's the motion that is written in the,
when that potential motion was written, we did not know
gotta have
yet.
that. So,
We did not have the,
so the motion, as long as that's a friendly amendment of the.
I say
of the
add
person,
it.
Yeah,
Okay.
then that includes that.
okay.
When was the start date for
The
that?
27th, we'd look to start the 5 minutes. Communicated out in advance that it would start on
So
2
it's,
weeks from now.
so the motion is to reestablish the school calendar with a recognition of June 2nd, 2023 as the final day of student instruction for 22-23 academic year, and to add 5 minutes to that day,
Starting on March 27th.
starting on March 27th.
Correct.
I'll make that motion.
We already have,
Already
it's
have it,
already
yeah,
been made
so-
and seconded. We're gonna vote on it now. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried. We are now open for a motion to adjourn, believe it or not.
I'll make it.
I'll second that.
Moved by John, seconded by Katie. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. This might be a record, folks, for a regular meeting.
Thank you. Good discussion.
Don't forget to do your plus deltas if you have any thoughts.
Mark, we have a line on it, it's in red.
We have that.
Stuck in the middle before, it's like, hey, we got from the law. We're in the ISM. Is it red, Bailey or whatnot, that's kind of a red background.
Okay.
Let's check it out.
You call it, it's not
See if it's
like you're free to-
hideous or if it can, they can look good, you know, that type of thing.
Repercussions.
Red and the blue or the gray.
No
Yeah,
Repercussions,
right. Yeah.
No, harmless.
Yes.
Is there any other?
So that,
Do you have your truck here? Okay, I'll throw that box in the back here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I read that one.
And it wasn't until after the years.
They were lobbying.
Yeah, and then
Changes.
I still wasn't 100% sure.
I remember my worst one.
Because not all the districts are.
Right, right.
Yeah.